In the high-stakes theater of global politics, there is one quality that is universally despised: boredom. We live in an age that rewards the loud, the fast, and the disruptive. We are told that to survive in the 21st century, a nation must move at the speed of a tweet. But what if that assumption is completely wrong? What if, in a world set on fire by chaos, the most dangerous weapon isn't speed, but friction? What if the most powerful shield isn't a missile system, but a stack of paperwork? Right now, the United States and Canada are locked in a conflict that goes far beyond tariffs or trade deficits. It is a clash between two fundamental ways of existing. On one side, we have the Trump doctrine: shock and awe. Move fast, break things, and force your opponent to panic. On the other side, we have something that looks, on the surface, like weakness. We have the Canadian government under Prime Minister Mark Carney. It looks slow. It looks bureaucratic. It looks, frankly, boring. And Donald Trump thinks he is winning because of it. He looks at Ottawa and sees a system that takes weeks to schedule a meeting and months to draft a memo. He interprets this as lethargy. He believes that Canada is a paralyzed animal waiting to be eaten, but he is making a fatal miscalculation. He doesn't realize that Canada isn't paralyzed. It is dug in. Mark Carney isn't moving slowly because he is confused. He is moving slowly because he knows that speed is Trump's only advantage. And by refusing to accelerate, by refusing to play the game at Trump's tempo, Canada is deploying a strategy that military historians would recognize immediately. It is called strategic depth. But instead of using land to absorb an invasion, Carney is using bureaucracy to absorb a trade war. Welcome to the weaponization of boredom. To understand how this works, we have to look at the events of August 1st, 2025. The day the 35% tariffs went into effect, Trump's strategy was textbook. He announced the tariffs with maximum noise. He used emergency powers. He cited national security. He sent urgent demands to Ottawa, expecting an immediate, emotional concession. This is how he operates. He creates a crisis at 9 a.m. and expects a surrender by 5 p.m. He relies on the other side's panic to close the deal. But what happened in Ottawa? Did Mark Carney fly to Washington to beg for mercy? Did he launch a fiery press conference denouncing American imperialism? No. He issued a statement, a very long, very dry, very technical statement. It didn't contain insults. It didn't contain threats. It contained paragraphs about supply chain integration and dispute resolution mechanisms under Chapter 10 of the USMCA. It was the diplomatic equivalent of reading a phone book, and it was brilliant. Because you cannot bully a phone book, Carney didn't give Trump a villain to fight. He gave him a process to navigate. Trump demanded a quick fix to the auto sector imbalance. Carney's team responded by forming a bilateral technical committee to study the issue for 6 months. Trump threatened to close the border over fentanyl. Carney responded by increasing the budget for border agency data processing software. It's unsexy. It doesn't make for good television. And that is exactly the point. Trump needs a show. He needs a protagonist and an antagonist. He needs drama to sustain his momentum. By stripping the drama out of the relationship, by turning every conflict into a boring technical dispute, Carney is starving the fire of oxygen. He is making the trade war too tedious to maintain. This isn't an accident. This is the technocratic shield. Mark Carney is a creature of the global financial system. He ran the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada. He knows that in the world of high finance, the person who gets emotional is the person who loses money. He understands that stability is an asset class. While Washington vibrates with the energy of a reality TV show finale, Ottawa hums with the quiet consistency of a server room, and global investors are noticing. Look at the capital flows since the tariffs began. You might expect money to flee Canada in the face of such aggressive American pressure, but the opposite is happening. European pension funds, Japanese conglomerates, and even American tech firms are quietly increasing their positions in Canada. Why? Because they are tired of the roller coaster. They look at the U.S. and they see a regulatory environment that changes with the president's mood. One day, electric vehicles are the future. The next day, they are the enemy. One day crypto is banned, the next day it's the national reserve currency. It is exciting, yes, but you cannot build a 30-year business plan on excitement. Canada, by contrast, offers the boredom premium. Carney has signaled that Canada will follow the rule of law, even when it hurts. He has signaled that contracts will be honored. He has signaled that policy will move at a glacial, predictable pace. For a CEO trying to decide where to build a multi-billion-dollar battery plant, that predictability is worth more than a tax cut. Trump calls Canada the 51st state. He thinks he is insulting Canada's lack of power, but in doing so, he is revealing his own blindness. He assumes that everyone wants to be part of the American show. He assumes that proximity to power is the ultimate prize. But Carney's response, that calm, flat, never, never, ever, wasn't just a rejection of annexation. It was a rejection of the American style of governance. It was a statement that Canada chooses the boring path of stability over the exciting path of dominance. And this choice is starting to yield unexpected results on the geopolitical stage. While Trump is obsessed with bilateral leverage, trying to squeeze Canada one-on-one, Carney is playing a multilateral game. He is using Canada's reputation for dull reliability to build a new network of alliances. In March 2025, Carney didn't just visit London and Paris. He went to Tokyo. He went to Seoul. He went to New Delhi. And in every capital, the message was the same. The United States is volatile. We are not. You need a North American partner who won't wake you up at 3 a.m. with a threat. You need a safe harbor. Canada is positioning itself as the hedge against American chaos. If you are a Japanese carmaker, you keep your U.S. factories to serve the U.S. market. But you build your R&D centers, your critical supply chains, and your long-term storage in Canada, because you know that in Canada, the rules won't change overnight. This is the genius of the boredom strategy. It turns Canada's biggest perceived weakness into its greatest strategic asset. For decades, Canadians have insecurely worried that they are too quiet, too polite, too cautious. They looked at the dynamism of the United States with a mix of envy and fear. But under Carney, that caution has been rebranded as resilience. That quietness has been rebranded as focus. Let's look at the lumber crisis as a case study of this dynamic. When Trump slapped the 35% tariff on Canadian lumber, he expected the Canadian forestry industry to collapse or capitulate immediately. He expected mill closures to force Ottawa to the table within weeks. And yes, it was painful. But Carney didn't react with a bailout or a subsidy war. He didn't try to outspend the United States. Instead, his government quietly accelerated the certification process for Canadian timber in European and Asian building codes. It was a bureaucratic move. It involved inspectors, stampers, and thousands of pages of technical documentation. It was incredibly boring. But 6 months later, Canadian lumber started flowing into German prefab housing markets and Japanese construction projects. The market diversified not with a bang, but with a whisper. By the time Trump realized that the pressure wasn't working, the supply chains had already shifted. He couldn't squeeze the Canadian industry because it had slowly, methodically leaked out of his grip. This is the fluidity of the boring. Water doesn't fight a rock, it flows around it. Bureaucracy, when used strategically, works the same way. It doesn't confront the shock, it redistributes it. But there is a risk to this strategy. It requires patience from the population, and this is where Carney faces his biggest test. Trump's style is addictive. The drama, the conflict, the simple narratives of heroes and villains, it appeals to the human brain. Carney's style is demanding. It asks Canadians to endure short-term pain for long-term gain without the catharsis of a screaming match. It asks them to trust in the slow grinding gears of the state. Can he maintain that trust? The polls suggest that, for now, the answer is yes. But not because Canadians love bureaucracy. It's because they fear the alternative. They look south, and they see what happens when institutions are eroded by charisma and impulse. They see the social division. They see the economic volatility. And they realize that boring is actually a luxury. Boredom means your bank account is safe. Boredom means your healthcare system works. Boredom means your prime minister isn't going to start a trade war because he had a bad night's sleep. Mark Carney has become the guardian of this luxury. He has turned the prime minister's office into a no-drama zone. When he runs in the morning, as described in that Toronto Life profile, he isn't listening to cable news. He isn't checking his approval ratings. He is likely thinking about yield curves and carbon adjustment mechanisms. To Trump, this makes Carney a non-entity, a man without a brand. But to the rest of the world, it makes him the adult in the room. And in a room full of children breaking toys, the adult is the one who eventually restores order. We are witnessing the end of the great man theory of North American politics. Trump believes that history is made by great men imposing their will on the world. Carney believes that history is made by resilient institutions surviving the whims of great men. It is a bet on the system over the individual. It is a bet on the team over the superstar. And as 2025 draws to a close, the scorecard is starting to favor the system. The American economy is overheating, burdened by the costs of its own protectionism. The tariffs that were meant to punish Canada are driving up inflation in American swing states. Builders in Texas can't get wood. Factories in Michigan can't get aluminum. The chaos is starting to eat itself. Meanwhile, Canada grinds on. A little slower, perhaps. A little quieter. But moving forward, the 51st state comment has faded from the headlines, replaced by the next Trump controversy. But the never, never, ever doctrine remains. It has hardened into a national policy of strategic decoupling. Canada is slowly, politely, and boringly closing the door on the era of total dependence. It is building a firewall of indifference. So, the next time you see Mark Carney give a speech that sounds like an economics lecture, the next time you see a Canadian response that seems to be buried in paperwork, don't mistake it for inaction. Don't mistake it for weakness. Recognize it for what it is: armor. Canada has turned itself into a porcupine. It doesn't attack. It doesn't roar. It just goes about its business. But if you try to step on it, you will regret it. And Donald Trump is learning that lesson the hard way. He is learning that you can tweet at a porcupine all night long, but at the end of the day, the porcupine doesn't care. It just keeps walking. This is the victory of the mundane over the magnificent, the triumph of the accountant over the acrobat, and in a world that is spinning out of control, perhaps boring is exactly what we need. What do you think? Is boredom really a strength? Or is Canada just delaying the inevitable? Can a bureaucracy really defeat a movement? Or is Mark Carney just managing the decline in a very polite way? Let us know in the comments below. We want to hear your take on the weaponization of boredom. Make sure to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden layers of global power. Thanks for watching.